Hi class, this is Mr. Durst here, and today we're going to be talking about the nervous system. In this presentation, we're going to focus on the introduction or the overview of the nervous system, and let's dive right into it. So, as we look at our nervous system, it's worth emphasizing, and I really can't understate this enough, the nervous system is very complicated, very complex. Extra emphasis right there. A lot of times the nervous system is going to be a 3 or 4 credit class all by itself in grad school. Neuroanatomy or neurophysiology is one of the tougher classes most of you are going to take in your graduate sequence. So we're going to try to take a lot of content and squeeze it down in just to a little bit of time in this class. And I just want to give you a disclaimer that there's a lot. There's many concepts and ideas that we will not be covering in this class, Anatomy and Physiology 1, because there just is not enough time to do it. As we look at our nervous system, it's the foundation of our personality, our behavior, and as we look at neurobiology, it's this interface between biology and psychology, kind of where they meld together. It's a very interesting topic. As we think of our nervous system is kind of like the endocrine system in that it's used to transmit information. We just finished our discussion on the endocrine system, but it's worth re-emphasizing that in the nervous system, we use electrical signals. In the endocrine system, we use only chemical signals. In the endocrine system, those signals are transmitted via the blood. In the nervous system, those electrical signals are sent down axons, down the cells, the length of the cell. And then when we go from the cell to cell, in between individual cells, we use a chemical means to transmit that signal. Now, as we think of our nervous system, there are 3 basic steps or things involved with the nervous system as it's carrying out its task. We need to get the information, process the information, and make a decision and act on, or I should say, get the information, make a decision, act on the decision. To get the information, we use sense organs. These sense organs are things like your thermoreceptors, your pressure receptors, your anything that you use to collect information about your body. These sense organs are going to then send the information to the brain and spinal cord. The brain and spinal cord are known as the central nervous system, CNS. So for the rest of this presentation, really this class, if you hear CNS, I want you to think central nervous system. Now, once that information gets into the central nervous system, it needs to be processed. It's going to be compared to previous experiences, previous hardwired synapses and connections, and then we make a decision, we make a response, and then after making the response, we act on the response. Our central nervous system is then going to issue a command. Usually those commands are going to go to skeletal muscle fibers, occasionally smooth or cardiac muscle fibers, and or glandular cells to make that decision a reality, to carry out the response, whatever the response may be. As we're looking at the central nervous system in this diagram, it is one of the major subdivisions. Our central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord, colored here in blue. Then we have the PNS, the peripheral nervous system. As we look at that peripheral nervous system, it involves everything that's nervous tissue outside of the brain and spinal cord. The main bulk of our peripheral nervous system is going to be a nerve and or ganglia. And when we think of a nerve, it is not a neuron. I'm going to say this again, not a neuron. A nerve is a bundle of axons from the neurons wrapped in some connective tissues, some fibrous connective tissues. The structure of the nerve we'll talk about later. It's very similar to skeletal muscle in that it's a bundle of bundles. In the peripheral nervous system, we also have ganglion. In this context, a ganglion is a bunch of neuronal cell bodies, a bunch of neurosoma grouped together in the peripheral nervous system. And if we look right here along the spinal cord, you probably have to squint or zoom in really close, you can see a bunch of yellow bulges. Those yellow bulges along the spinal cord are all individual ganglia along that spinal column. They're outside of the spinal cord or vertebral column, so we refer to them as the peripheral nervous system. We're going to camp on this slide quite a bit here. This is a slide, I'm putting a star in the corner because, hey, this is a really important slide. This slide is going to give you a roadmap for the nervous system. And as we're looking at our nervous system here, the central nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord. Outside of the central nervous system, we have the peripheral nervous system. And our peripheral nervous system can be broken into two subdivisions. We have the sensory division and the motor division. And I'm not a big fan of the arrows here. I think for the sensory division side, we should have the arrows going up, because it's going to send the information to the brain and spinal cord, to the CNS. And within that sensory division, we have the visceral and somatic sensory divisions. We'll talk about those in more detail in a bit. Within the motor division, we're also going to have the visceral and somatic motor divisions. These two branches of the motor division can be thought of as the involuntary and the voluntary branches of the motor division. When we think of motor division, I want you to think of movement. So these are going to be the signals leaving the brain and spinal cord. These are the actions being made. Our somatic or voluntary motor division is primarily going to be involved with skeletal muscle fibers making voluntary contractions. As we look at our visceral motor division, this visceral motor division is sometimes referred to as the autonomic nervous system. I'll admit I'm more of an autonomic nervous system guy because my first two A&P instructors drilled it into my head that way. And as we're looking at this visceral motor division, the two subdivisions of the visceral motor division are the sympathetic and the parasympathetic motor divisions. Sympathetic is referred to as the fight or flight. This gets you ready for a high stress, high anxiety situation with lots of physical activity. And then we have the parasympathetic branch. I should go ahead and minimize this. We have that parasympathetic branch, which is referred to as the rest and digest branch of the nervous system that helps us to redirect blood towards the digestive system and also recover from physical exertion and repair tissue damage. Let's talk about them in more detail here. As we look at the peripheral nervous system, that somatic sensory division of the sensory, also known as afferent division, is going to be primarily concerned with carrying signals from skin, muscles, bones, joints, and hips, or bones and joints. So I want you to think of, you can think of the somatic sensory division as analogous to the somatic motor division. It's going to be primarily concerned with things that are outside of the abdominal pelvic cavity and thoracic cavity. And when we think of this visceral sensory division, let's look at this word visceral. As we think of visceral, I want you to think of organs. You could think back to the visceral serosa, the inner layer of a serous membrane that's pressed directly against the organ. The visceral sensory division is going to carry sensory information from the organs of the abdominal pelvic and the thoracic cavity, minus skin, muscle, bones, and joints. As we're looking at the motor division, our motor division oftentimes is referred to as the efferent division. I want you to think of it for the sensory division or afferent division accesses the central nervous system. The efferent division exits the central nervous system. The signal is leaving the CNS, and it's going to go to the rest of the body. Within that efferent division, the somatic motor division is the voluntary, and I can't emphasize enough, this is going to be voluntary. Every once in a while, we're going to have some involuntary contractions. These involuntary contractions are going to be associated with reflexive movement of skeletal muscle fibers. Stepping on a sharp rock would cause you to involuntarily withdraw your foot. Putting your hand on something hot will cause you to involuntarily withdraw your hand. Or if you stop thinking about it, you involuntarily start contracting your diaphragm to breathe in and breathe out. We also are going to have the visceral motor division associated with the organs. This, we don't have any conscious control over. It happens automatically. It's referred to as the autonomic nervous system. And I can't emphasize enough, involuntary. This autonomic nervous system, we cannot control consciously. Within the autonomic nervous system, we are going to have those two subdivisions, the sympathetic or fight or flight division. This gets the body aroused. And when I say aroused, I don't mean like you're being turned on sexually. I mean that you are getting ready for lots of physical activity. Your heart's going to go up, your respiration rate, the rate you breathe in and out, increases. You are going to inhibit digestive and urinary system functions, because if you're being chased by a bear It's not very important to digest your meal. It's very important instead to run as quickly as you can. So we redirect blood flow to the parts of our body that will help us run away from that mama bear that's chasing us. As we look at the parasympathetic division, the parasympathetic division is known as that rest and digest division, and it tends to calm us down. It slows our heart rate, slows our respiratory rhythms, and will focus on digestion and urinary system processing. And it's also, again, worth emphasizing that the parasympathetic division helps aid us with tissue healing and tissue recovery. That's all we have for this recording. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them on the class discussion board or shoot me an email. And happy studies.